The water temperature reads 199 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cook an egg in minutes, hot enough to kill a person in seconds. And yet, on a crisp September morning in 1981, 24-year-old David Kerwin made a decision that would turn Yellowstone's most beautiful thermal feature into his grave. Kerwin wasn't alone that day. His friend Ronald Ratliff had brought his dog, a small terrier named Moosey, for what should have been a routine sightseeing trip to Celestine Pool. The spring sits like a jewel in Yellowstone's backcountry, its crystal clear water so inviting that visitors often mistake it for a natural hot tub. The pool's edges are lined with brilliant orange and yellow thermophile bacteria, creating a rainbow effect that draws tourists from around the world. But beneath that stunning surface lies water hot enough to kill. What happened next would become one of the most documented cases of thermal feature fatality in Yellowstone's history, and it reveals something disturbing about human psychology when faced with natural warnings. Because David Kerwin wasn't the first person to ignore the obvious dangers of Yellowstone's thermal features, and he certainly wouldn't be the last. The morning started like thousands of others in Yellowstone. Families loaded into cars, cameras ready, expecting nothing more dangerous than a possible bear sighting in the distance. Kerwin and Ratliff had driven the winding roads through the park, past the familiar signs warning visitors to stay on designated paths and keep away from thermal features. These weren't suggestions buried in fine print. They were bold, unavoidable warnings posted every few hundred yards. But something about Celestine Pool seemed different to these young men. Maybe it was the way the morning light caught the steam rising from the water. Maybe it was the absence of the usual crowds that gather around Old Faithful. Or maybe it was simply the kind of overconfidence that makes 20-something men believe they're immune to the laws of physics that govern everyone else. Moosey, the small terrier, had been running free despite park regulations requiring dogs to be leashed. The animal, drawn by instincts that couldn't comprehend the danger, bounded toward the thermal pool. In an instant, the dog leaped into what it must have perceived as just another pond. But the water that looked so inviting was hot enough to be instantly fatal. This is where David Kerwin faced a choice that would define the last moments of his life. He could stay back and find help, or he could act. Witnesses later described the agonizing seconds as Kerwin weighed his options across the thermal basin. Every rational thought should have told him to stay back, to find park rangers, to accept that some tragedies can't be prevented by heroic gestures. Instead, Kerwin stripped off his shoes and dove in after the dog. The human body isn't designed to survive in water approaching the boiling point. At 199 degrees Fahrenheit, the injuries are severe and immediate, and they're injuries the body simply cannot recover from. But here's what makes Kerwin's story particularly haunting. The danger isn't always immediately apparent to the person caught in it. Witnesses watched as Kerwin managed to grab the dog and swim back toward the edge of the pool, and for a moment, it looked as though he might have made it. "That was stupid," Kerwin reportedly said as bystanders pulled him from the water. "How bad am I?" These would be among his last coherent words. Within hours, despite the efforts of park medical staff and emergency helicopters, David Kerwin died from his injuries. The dog he died trying to save didn't survive either. The Kerwin incident might be dismissed as an isolated case of poor judgment if it weren't part of a much larger pattern. Since Yellowstone's establishment in 1872, at least 22 people have died in the park's thermal features, and hundreds more have suffered serious injuries. What's remarkable isn't the number of accidents, it's how consistently they follow the same script. Take the case of Colin Nathaniel Scott, a 23-year-old from Oregon who died in 2016 while attempting to soak in a hot spring near the Pork Chop Geyser. Scott and his sister had hiked off the designated boardwalk looking for a thermal pool where they could take a dip. They had even brought a video camera to document their adventure, apparently unaware that they were filming their own tragedy. Scott was testing the water temperature with his hand when the ground beneath his feet gave way. The thin crust that forms around many thermal features had fooled him into thinking he was standing on solid ground. Instead, he fell into water that measured over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. His sister could only watch as her brother fell into the acidic spring. By the time rescue teams could reach the site, recovery was no longer possible. The Scott case reveals another layer of the thermal feature problem: the deceptive nature of the environment itself. Yellowstone's thermal areas don't look dangerous to the untrained eye. The ground appears solid. The water looks inviting. There are no obvious warning signs like the roar of a waterfall or the visible current of a river. Instead, these features present themselves as nature's own hot tubs, complete with mineral deposits that create stunning visual effects. But here's the disturbing reality that most visitors never consider. These aren't just hot springs. They're geological time bombs connected to one of the world's most powerful volcanic systems. The same forces that could potentially trigger a supervolcanic eruption are what make your morning coffee seem lukewarm by comparison. Researchers who study Yellowstone's thermal features describe the psychological trap that catches so many visitors. People see water, and the brain immediately categorizes it as safe. We're hardwired to seek out water sources, and the visual cues that would normally warn us about temperature, like steam or bubbling, can actually make these features more attractive to many people. The temperature variations across Yellowstone's thermal features create another layer of complexity. Some springs hover around 100 degrees Fahrenheit, warm enough for a comfortable soak if they weren't loaded with toxic chemicals. Others exceed 200 degrees, hot enough to cause fatal injuries in seconds. But from a distance, they're virtually indistinguishable. Park officials have tried everything to prevent thermal feature accidents. Warning signs are posted in multiple languages. Boardwalks keep visitors at safe distances from the most dangerous areas. Rangers patrol popular thermal zones and give regular safety talks. Educational materials explain the science behind thermal features and the very real dangers they present. Yet people continue to ignore these warnings with startling regularity. In 2000, a 20-year-old woman from Washington state left the designated path at Grand Prismatic Spring to get a better photograph. She slipped and fell into a thermal runoff channel, suffering serious burns that required extensive treatment and months of recovery. Her injuries could have been avoided by simply staying on the boardwalk that was built specifically to provide safe viewing of the same feature. The photography angle reveals another troubling trend in thermal feature incidents. Social media has created new pressures for visitors to capture unique images, leading some to take increasingly dangerous risks for the perfect shot. Instagram feeds are filled with images of people posing dangerously close to thermal features, often with captions that joke about the risks they're taking. Rangers who have worked in the park for years describe the frustration of watching visitors repeatedly ignore safety protocols. They will spend 20 minutes explaining why people need to stay on designated paths, then watch someone hop the barrier 5 minutes later because they want a selfie. It's as if they think the laws of physics do not apply to them personally. The "it won't happen to me" mentality appears to be particularly strong when it comes to thermal features. Unlike other park dangers, grizzly bears for instance, which visitors treat with appropriate caution, thermal features seem to trigger a different psychological response. Perhaps it's because they do not move or make noise. Perhaps it's because they look so benign from a distance. Or perhaps it's simply human nature to underestimate invisible dangers. But the science behind thermal features leaves no room for wishful thinking. Yellowstone sits atop one of the world's most powerful volcanic systems, with magma chambers located just a few miles below the surface. This underground heat source creates the thermal activity that makes the park famous, but it also makes these features fundamentally different from any hot tub or natural spring that visitors might have encountered elsewhere. The water in Yellowstone's thermal features is not just hot, it's often highly acidic or alkaline, loaded with dissolved minerals that can cause chemical burns even at lower temperatures. Some springs contain hydrogen sulfide, which is toxic in high concentrations. Others have pH levels so extreme that they can break down organic material in a short time. Geochemists who study Yellowstone's thermal features point out that even non-fatal exposure can have lasting consequences. Visitors every year think they can quickly dip a toe or a finger into a thermal feature, not realizing that even brief contact with these waters can cause permanent injury. The medical challenges of treating thermal feature injuries add another layer of tragedy to these incidents. Unlike burns from fire or hot surfaces, thermal water injuries often combine extreme heat with chemical exposure, which complicates treatment. Emergency responders in the Yellowstone area have developed specialized protocols for thermal injuries, but the remote location of many thermal features means that critical treatment is often delayed. In the case of David Kerwin, medical personnel noted that his injuries were unlike anything they had seen from conventional burns. The combination of extreme heat and chemical exposure made treatment extraordinarily difficult even with modern medical techniques. The psychological impact on witnesses adds yet another dimension to thermal feature tragedies. Unlike other types of accidents, thermal feature incidents often unfold slowly enough that bystanders feel compelled to help, but they are powerless to intervene safely. The guilt and trauma experienced by people who witness one of these events can last for years. Ronald Ratliff, David Kerwin's friend who owned the dog that started the fatal chain of events, reportedly struggled with survivors' guilt for decades after the incident. Witnesses to the Colin Scott accident, including his sister, have described the lasting psychological impact of what they saw that day. What's perhaps most chilling about these witness accounts is how quickly hope turns to horror. One moment someone is taking what seems like a calculated risk, the next they're beyond any possibility of rescue. It's a reminder that in nature, there's often no second chance to correct a mistake. Park officials have studied these incidents extensively, looking for patterns that might help prevent future tragedies. What they found is that thermal feature accidents rarely involve people who are completely unaware of the dangers. Most victims have received safety briefings, read warning signs, and understand intellectually that thermal features are dangerous. Instead, these accidents typically involve a moment of poor judgment, often triggered by an emotional response. Someone wants to help an animal in distress, like David Kerwin. Someone wants to capture a unique photograph, like the visitors who leave designated paths for better camera angles. Someone wants to experience something extraordinary, like the people who attempt to soak in thermal features. The emotional component of these decisions helps explain why traditional safety measures have limited effectiveness. Logic and reasoning work well for preventing accidents that result from ignorance or carelessness, but they're less effective against decisions made in moments of strong emotion or social pressure. Recent research in behavioral psychology suggests that the most effective prevention strategies might need to address the emotional and social factors that drive risky behavior around thermal features. Some parks have begun experimenting with virtual reality experiences that allow visitors to experience thermal features safely, potentially satisfying the desire for unique experiences without the associated risks. What's your take on this? Have you ever been tempted to get closer to something dangerous for a better photo or a unique experience? The psychology behind these decisions affects all of us in different situations. If you're finding this exploration of human behavior and natural dangers fascinating, make sure to subscribe. We dive deep into stories that reveal the complex relationship between people and the natural world. Other prevention strategies focus on changing the physical environment rather than relying solely on visitor behavior. Enhanced barriers. Around the most dangerous thermal features, improved camera positioning for safe photography, and expanded boardwalk systems all aim to make safe behavior easier than risky behavior. But perhaps the most important lesson from thermal feature tragedies is that natural beauty and natural danger often go hand in hand. Yellowstone's thermal features are spectacular precisely because they represent raw geological forces that dwarf human scale and human control. The same processes that create the stunning visual displays also create conditions that can kill without warning. The park's thermal features serve as a reminder that nature operates according to physical laws that don't make exceptions for human desires or good intentions. Water at 199 degrees Fahrenheit is fatal, regardless of why someone enters it. Acidic springs cause chemical burns, whether someone falls in accidentally or jumps in to save a dog. This reality doesn't diminish the heroic impulses that drive people like David Kerwin to risk their lives for others, but it does suggest that true respect for nature requires acknowledging its power and accepting the limitations it imposes on human action. The stories of thermal feature tragedies also highlight the importance of understanding risk in outdoor recreation. Every natural environment contains hazards that may not be immediately obvious to visitors. Hot springs that look like natural hot tubs, rivers that appear calm on the surface but hide deadly currents underneath, rock formations that seem stable but can collapse without warning. Experienced outdoor enthusiasts develop an instinct for recognizing and respecting these hidden dangers. They understand that nature's beauty often masks serious risks, and they plan accordingly. But casual visitors, especially those accustomed to highly managed urban environments, may lack the experience to recognize natural hazards until it's too late. Consider this. In our daily lives, we're surrounded by safety systems designed to protect us from our own poor judgment. Cars have airbags and crumple zones, buildings have fire exits and sprinkler systems, even playground equipment is designed with safety margins that account for misuse. But nature doesn't come with these built-in protections. If you're planning to visit Yellowstone or any area with thermal features, what precautions do you think are most important? The lessons from these tragedies could apply to many outdoor situations where natural beauty and natural danger coexist. Education remains the primary tool for preventing thermal feature accidents, but it needs to go beyond simple warning signs and safety talks. Effective education helps visitors understand not just what the rules are, but why they exist. It explains the science behind thermal features, the medical reality of thermal injuries, and the psychological factors that lead people to make risky decisions. Some of the most effective safety programs use real case studies, like the David Kerwin incident, to illustrate the consequences of ignoring thermal feature safety. These stories provide concrete examples of how quickly situations can turn tragic, making abstract risks feel more real and immediate. The challenge is delivering this education in a way that doesn't diminish the wonder and excitement that draws people to places like Yellowstone in the first place. The goal isn't to scare visitors away from thermal features, but to help them appreciate these natural phenomena safely and responsibly. For those who love the outdoors and want to share that passion with others, thermal feature safety offers important lessons about risk communication and education. The most effective approaches combine scientific information with emotional understanding, helping people make better decisions by appealing to both logic and intuition. The legacy of people like David Kerwin isn't just a cautionary tale about the dangers of thermal features. It's also a reminder of the human capacity for selfless action, even in the face of mortal danger. Kerwin's decision to try to save a suffering animal, while ultimately tragic, reflects the kind of compassion and courage that define the best of human nature. The challenge for park managers, educators, and outdoor enthusiasts is finding ways to honor that impulse toward heroism while channeling it in directions that don't lead to preventable tragedies. Sometimes the most heroic action is the disciplined choice to stay safe, to follow established protocols, and to accept that not every situation can be improved by individual intervention. As visitors continue to flock to Yellowstone and other natural areas with thermal features, the lessons learned from past tragedies become increasingly important. Each incident provides new insights into human behavior, risk perception, and the complex relationship between people and the natural world. But here's what really matters. These stories aren't just about individual tragedies. They're about understanding how we as humans interact with forces beyond our control. Every time someone chooses to respect natural boundaries, they're not just keeping themselves safe, they're honoring the memory of people like David Kerwin, who paid the ultimate price for a moment of heroic impulse. If this story has made you think differently about risk and safety in natural environments, hit that like button. These are the kinds of stories that need to be shared, because understanding the psychology behind these tragedies might just prevent the next one. The crystal-clear water of Celestine Pool still draws visitors today, just as it did on that September morning in 1981 when David Kerwin made his fateful decision. The pool looks exactly the same, beautiful, inviting, and deadly. The only difference is the knowledge we've gained from the tragedies that have unfolded there, and the responsibility we bear to ensure that future visitors understand what those pristine waters really represent. Not a swimming pool, but a window into the raw power that lies just beneath Yellowstone's deceptively peaceful surface.